1162. A child entered the world clutching a blood clot in his tiny fist, an omen that terrified the shaman attending his birth. That starving orphan boy, who would survive by eating wild onions and marmots just to see another frozen dawn, would grow to command an empire larger than Rome at its peak. Alexander's conquests and Napoleon's Europe combined. One man's DNA flows through 16 million living descendants today. That's 0.5% of every man currently alive on Earth. His armies would erase entire civilizations so completely that only dust remains where great cities stood. Yet this same destroyer created the first truly global economy, connecting Europe to China for the first time in human history. By the end of this story, you'll understand how a homeless nomad boy became the most successful conqueror in all of human history, why his name still triggers primal fear 8 centuries after his death, and the shocking truth about his legacy that completely contradicts everything you think you know. You'll discover the secret military innovation that made 100,000 horsemen unstoppable against millions of infantry. Why he deliberately murdered 1.75 million people in a single city and considered it an act of calculated mercy. The hidden law code that transformed barbaric warring tribes into history's most efficient empire. But first, 3 mysteries that seem statistically impossible. How did orphan Temujin survive being enslaved with a heavy wooden collar locked around his neck? What was the arrow message that triggered the complete annihilation of an empire spanning from Persia to India? Why did Genghis Khan's own generals fear him more than they feared death itself on the battlefield? Here are 3 facts that defy belief. He controlled more land than any empire before the Industrial Age. His military campaigns killed 11% of the entire world's population. He created the first intercontinental free trade zone protected by a single law code. How does a boy named Temujin, meaning ironworker in the Mongol tongue, become Genghis Khan, the universal ruler who would reshape the planet? To understand how one man's rage transformed continents, we must journey back to the frozen steppes of 1162, where survival itself was a daily war against starvation, cold, and tribal violence. Picture the Mongolian steppe in your mind. Winters plunging to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, where exposed skin freezes in minutes, where tribal warfare was constant as sunrise and Chinese manipulation of barbarian tribes was standard policy. No cities rose from these grasslands, no agriculture sustained permanent populations, just endless seas of grass, where only the strongest, most ruthless families survived to see another bitter spring. Meet the players in young Temujin's tragedy that would birth an empire written in blood. Yasuge, the brave, his father, a minor chieftain poisoned by Tatar enemies when Temujin was just 9 years old. Holun the fierce, a mother who kept her 5 starving children alive on roots, rodents, and wild onions after their entire tribe abandoned them to die. Jamuka, the sworn blood brother Temujin's childhood friend who would become his greatest enemy and ideological opposite. Borte the Wise, the girl betrothed to Temujin, who would be kidnapped on their wedding night and birth an empire from her suffering. The steppe operated on rules simple and brutal. Raid or be raided, kill or be killed, trust no one beyond your immediate bloodline. Chinese dynasties, the Jin in the north, Song in the south, had perfected the art of keeping nomadic tribes weak and divided, arm one tribe to destroy another, ensure eternal warfare among the barbarians. Pay tribute to the strongest to raid the others. Into this world of betrayal, blood feuds, and frozen winters, Temujin was born marked by prophecy, but cursed by circumstance that should have killed him a dozen times before manhood. His father's death meant more than orphanhood. The Taichiu tribe didn't merely abandon Yasuge's widow and children, they actively hunted them, viewing the orphans as future threats to their own power. At 16, Temujin was captured and enslaved. A heavy wooden collar locked around his neck like livestock, paraded before the tribe as a warning to others. But here's what sanitized histories won't tell you about the moment that forged the conqueror. When Temujin escaped by smashing his captor's skull with that same wooden collar, using the instrument of his humiliation as a weapon of revenge, something fundamental changed in his soul. The boy who had begged for scraps and hidden from enemies became something else entirely, something that would make emperors tremble. But first came more disasters designed to break any normal man. The Merkits, a rival tribe, stole his wife Borte in a raid, leaving the young warrior with just 7 loyal followers and a heart filled with rage that would consume nations. When he finally rescued her months later, she was visibly pregnant with a captor's child. Lesser men, bound by steppe tradition, would have rejected her as dishonored, cast out the child as enemy blood. Temujin declared the boy named Jochi, meaning guest, his heir without hesitation. This wasn't compassion born of love, it was calculation born of vision. He was already thinking beyond tradition, beyond the petty rules that kept the steppe tribes weak and divided. Your father climbed high and flew far. His mother Ho-Lun told him after another near-death escape from enemies, but flying wolves fall hardest when they tumble from the sky. She was wrong about her son. This particular wolf would teach the world that some falls are merely the beginning of flight that reaches beyond the clouds. But how does a teenage exile with 7 ragged followers challenge warlords commanding thousands of experienced warriors? The blood brotherhood sworn with Jamuka brought Temujin his first real military power, 20,000 warriors, who remembered his father's reputation and respected the old alliances. But alliances on the wind-swept steppe were written in sand, not carved in stone. When the Merkits kidnapped Borte, it triggered more than a rescue mission. It launched a revolution in how steppe warfare would be conducted. The raid to reclaim his wife revealed Temujin's emerging genius for systematic warfare. Instead of traditional steppe tactics, wild cavalry charges relying on individual courage, he coordinated multiple forces using scouts and signals, gathered intelligence on enemy positions and strength, then struck with mathematical precision at their weakest point. The Merkits expected the usual wild barbarian cavalry charge. Instead, they experienced systematic annihilation delivered by an army that fought as one coordinated weapon. Here's where Temujin shattered every sacred rule of steppe warfare and tribal culture. He promoted warriors based purely on merit and loyalty, not birth or clan connections. Jelme, a blacksmith's son with no noble blood, became one of his greatest generals. Orphans he adopted commanded thousands of warriors. He organized his growing forces in revolutionary decimal units, squads of 10, companies of 100, battalions of 1,000, divisions of 10,000. This created history's first truly modular army where every unit could function independently, yet coordinate perfectly. The enemies circling him like wolves represented the old order desperate to crush this upstart. The Taichud commanded 30,000 warriors and wanted revenge for kinsmen Temujin had killed. The Tatars, his father's murderers, fielded 70,000 of the steppe's most experienced warriors. The Naimans controlled the western grasslands with 100,000 riders. The Kharites, Mongols who'd converted to Nestorian Christianity, could summon 200,000 if threatened. Then came the moment that would echo through 8 centuries of nightmares. The final split with blood brother Jamuka. 2 completely opposed ideologies collided with no possibility of compromise. Jamuka championed aristocratic tradition where birth determined rank and commoners served nobles. Temujin preached meritocracy where talent earned command regardless of bloodline. When they separated, both claimed the title of Khan's supreme ruler. The steppe couldn't hold 2 suns in one sky. Temujin introduced psychological warfare that would become his signature method of conquest. When he captured Taichiyud nobles who had enslaved him as a youth, he didn't simply execute them. He had them boiled alive slowly in massive cauldrons while their armies watched from a distance, hearing the screams. The message was unmistakably clear. Opposition meant not quick death in battle, but prolonged suffering that transcended mortal fear. His military innovations accelerated with each campaign and victory. Each Mongol warrior maintained 5 horses minimum, switching mounts constantly to maintain speeds that seemed impossible to enemies. They could cover 100 miles daily when European armies managed barely 20 miles. Every man carried 60 arrows in his quiver and could accurately shoot 6 arrows per minute at full gallop, a skill requiring lifelong training from childhood. Their composite bows, constructed from layers of horn, sinew, and wood, could punch through armor at 350 yards, outranging any bow in existence. Modern military historians still cannot fully explain the achievement. How did Temujin transform undisciplined tribal raiders into the ancient world's most disciplined military force? The answer was simultaneously simple and terrifying in its implications. He made them believe they were destiny incarnate, chosen by the eternal blue sky to rule the earth. By 1206, the scattered fragments were ready to become an unstoppable avalanche. At the source of the Onan River, the last free Mongol tribes gathered for a cruelty, a great assembly that would determine whether Asia would have one Khan or remain 1,000 feuding clans forever. Days 1 through 3 saw tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Temujin's white banner flew beside Jamukha's black standard as tribes gathered, Naimans from the west, Karites from the south, scattered clans choosing sides in the coming storm. Then something happened that defied 4,000 years of steppe political tradition. Temujin's shaman Kokchu declared him chosen by Tengri himself, the eternal blue sky god. This was a pattern interrupt in steppe politics where divine mandate trumped traditional clan-based selection. The Naimans struck first, attempting a surprise night attack across the Khwarazm River. But Temujin had positioned scouts in patterns no steppe warlord had ever imagined, concentric circles extending 20 miles in all directions. The Mongols knew every enemy movement before it began. What followed became known as the Khwarazm River Deception. Temujin's forces retreated in apparent disorder and panic, drawing the overconfident Naimans deep into prepared killing grounds. Prince Taiyang of the Naimans realized far too late that his 100,000 warriors had charged into a closing claw formation. In 6 hours of systematic slaughter, 40,000 Mongols destroyed a force more than twice their size. But this wasn't typical steppe massacre where victory meant plunder and chaos. Temujin's decimal system proved its revolutionary worth units wheeled and struck with mechanical precision, each commander knowing exactly his role in the larger choreography of death. Then came the moment that would haunt every civilization for the next 2 centuries. Jamukha's own generals, seeing the future written clearly in Naiman blood, brought their leader to Temujin bound in chains. The Blood Brothers faced each other for the final time across an impossible gulf. "Kill me without spilling blood," Jamukha requested, as befits a Khan of noble birth. Temujin offered brotherhood restored, shared rule over the united tribes, forgiveness for past betrayals. Jamukha refused with words that sealed his fate. There can be only one sun in the sky, one Khan on the steppes. His back was broken by Mongol executioners. His eyes watched the eternal blue sky as life slowly left them. With Jamukha dead and the Naimans destroyed, every remaining tribe bowed to the inevitable. The exile-eating roots had become Genghis Khan universal ruler, but ruling the steppe wasn't enough for the hunger that had gnawed at a starving orphan boy. That same hunger now gnawed at an empire. The military revolution was complete, refined through countless battles. Light cavalry comprised 60% of his forces, each mounted archer a mobile artillery platform capable of loosing arrows at 350 yards while galloping. Heavy cavalry formed the remaining 40%, wearing Chinese-style lamellar armor and carrying lances for devastating shock assault when the moment came. Every warrior maintained discipline that would impress Roman legions. Death for breaking formation without orders, death for looting before permission, death for showing mercy without authorization,